On the 9th of May, 1857, 85 Indian soldiers were stripped of their uniforms in front of their own regiment, put in irons, and marched to a jail cell. Their offense was refusing to bite a cartridge. The next morning, their comrades broke that jail open, and within 15 months, the company that had ruled India did not exist. The men who did it were not outsiders. They were the company's own soldiers, on the company's own payroll, and until that week, they were the whole reason a corporation could hold a subcontinent at all. Two things to carry with you. A poet in his 80s, whose kingdom had shrunk to the walls of his own palace, was about to be pushed back onto a throne he never asked for. And the argument over what to call this year, a mutiny or a first war of independence, has never stopped. This is the story of the year the machine broke. History, audited. In January 1857, a new pattern rifle arrived in company cantonments, the Enfield, a weapon accurate to 500 yards. To load it, the soldier had to bite open a paper cartridge, pour in the powder, and ram it home with the ball. The cartridges came pre-greased, and the grease, this is where the rumor ignited, was said to be a mixture of cow tallow and pork lard. For a Hindu soldier, cow fat was a defilement. For a Muslim soldier, pork lard was forbidden. For both, touching it with your mouth was pollution. The company's response to soldiers' complaints was, at best, dismissive. At worst, it publicly paraded and imprisoned 85 men of the 3rd Bengal Light Cavalry at Meerut on the 9th of May, 1857, stripped of their uniforms, shackled, and marched to the jail in front of their comrades. On the 10th of May, those comrades broke open the jail. Stop here, because the cartridge was the spark, not the fire. The fire had been building for years, from layers of grievance that we have been auditing across this whole series. Start with the economic. The annexations under the doctrine of lapse had dispossessed not only princes, but entire court economies, nobles, clerks, retainers, servants, soldiers. The sepoys of the Bengal army were largely drawn from the peasant and gentry communities of Awadh and the Gangetic Plain. When Awadh was annexed in 1856, thousands of their families lost status and income overnight. Then the military. The General Service Enlistment Act of 1856 required new recruits to serve wherever ordered, including overseas. For many high-caste Hindu soldiers, crossing the sea meant ritual pollution, the loss of caste. The direction was clear. Indian religious practice was an inconvenience to be managed away. Then the longer anxiety. British missionaries were active. There was a widespread fear, reasonable in some cases, exaggerated in others, that the company intended to convert India to Christianity. A sepoy in May 1857 weighed his options: stay within the system and accept a defilement you cannot refuse, protest individually and be imprisoned as the Meerut men were, or join the breaking. On the 9th of May, watching 85 comrades shackled in front of you, the third option had a logic the first two did not. The Meerut sepoys did not stop at Meerut. They marched through the night and reached Delhi on the morning of the 11th of May. In the Red Fort lived Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor. He was in his 80s, a poet, a mystic, a man whose territory consisted of the palace walls and whose stipend came from the company. He had not asked for this, but when the soldiers arrived and declared him Shahenshah-e-Hindustan, Emperor of Hindustan, the symbol was irresistible. The Mughal name, however hollow its power, was still the legitimate name of Indian sovereignty. By invoking it, the rebels were not merely mutinying against their officers. They were repudiating the entire architecture of company rule. The company had already announced that Bahadur Shah would be the last Mughal, his successors mere princes, the dynasty to be ended. By making him emperor again, the uprising was reversing that announcement by force. Delhi fell to the rebels within hours. British officers and civilians were killed. The violence was real, and it was severe. From Delhi, the rebellion spread, though unevenly. And that unevenness matters for the argument about what kind of thing it was. In Kanpur, Nana Sahib, the Peshwa's heir, had his own grievance. The company had refused to continue his pension. He joined the uprising. British forces were besieged and eventually surrendered under a promise of safe passage. What followed became the atrocity around which British public opinion hardened into ferocity. The precise circumstances remain contested by historians. What is not contested is that significant violence occurred, and that British reprisals drew on it as justification. In Lucknow, the British Residency came under extended siege from June 1857. The garrison held out for months. Lucknow became the siege that defined British popular memory of 1857. Beyond these centers, Jhansi, where Rani Lakshmi Bai took up arms against the company that had refused to recognize her adopted son's succession. Bundelkhand, parts of Bihar. The rebellion was real, and it was wide. The Madras and Bombay armies, notably, did not join. The Sikhs of Punjab, who the company had conquered only 8 years before, largely fought on the company's side. The rebellion was centered in the Bengal army and the regions of its recent annexations. This is where we have to pause and do something this channel always does: name the contest. The British called it the Sepoy Mutiny. The term implies a localized military indiscipline, soldiers with a grievance, not a population with a cause. It was the framing chosen by those who suppressed it, and it served to deny the rebellion any political legitimacy. Later Indian nationalists called it the First War of Independence. That framing reclaims the event as a precursor to 1947, a proto-nationalist uprising against foreign occupation. Both are arguments, not descriptions. Historians have documented how genuinely mass the uprising was in certain regions. Towns, peasants, artisans joined, not merely soldiers. Others point to how localized it remained, how many Indian soldiers and rulers stayed loyal, and how it lacked a unified political program beyond restoring the Mughal throne. What seems fair to say? It was larger than a mutiny. It was not yet a nation. It was something in between, a breakdown of the machine at the precise points where the machine had pressed hardest. The British response took months and required calling in troops from elsewhere in the empire. Delhi was retaken in September 1857, after prolonged fighting in which both sides suffered heavily. Lucknow was finally relieved and then cleared by early 1858. The last significant military action, the fall of Gwalior, came in June 1858. Bahadur Shah Zafar was captured at Humayun's tomb. He was tried and exiled to Rangoon, Burma, where he died on the 7th of November, 1862. His sons were killed. The Mughal dynasty ended not with the battle, but with a British officer, a prison, and a foreign city. The reprisals were severe and in many cases indiscriminate. They were documented by British observers at the time. They produced a wound in the collective memory of the subcontinent that is not fully closed. The company faced a choice about how to restore order: proportionate force, exemplary punishment intended to deter, or a political settlement addressing grievances. It chose the second. And then, at the highest level, a third option was imposed, not by the company, but by Parliament. The rebellion did not achieve its stated aims. The Mughal throne was not restored. India was not freed from British rule. What it did do was make the company's continued existence untenable as a governing institution. Parliament had been regulating the company since 1773 and controlling its political decisions since 1784. Now, after the largest military crisis in the company's history, the question posed itself with new force. Can a corporation be trusted with a subcontinent? The answer, given in 1858, was no. Next time, the company's end. How a charter corporation that began with 200 shareholders in 1600 was dissolved by an act of parliament in 1858, and what replaced it. 1857 is the event this entire series has been building toward. The moment when all the decisions we have audited across 10 episodes came due at once. The cartridge was the invoice. The machine, the army, the annexations, the revenue systems, the dismissed grievances, was the debt. You can call it a mutiny. You can call it a war of independence. What you cannot call it is a surprise. Next time, the Government of India Act 1858. The company ends. The Raj begins. This is Tareekh ka Hisaab.